Halloween was universally, across the board, panned by every reviewer who saw it. They said it wasn't frightening. They said it was stupid. They said it was too low budget. They said it was a dumb idea. As I look at the movie, the primary influence on the style of the film was the work of Alfred Hitchcock. Halloween came about from a conversation I had with Mustafa Akkad when I was in England. He said, let's make a movie together. And I came back to the United States, and Irwin Ybalans brought me in and said, I want to make a $300,000 movie called The Babysitter Murders. And can you make it for that little money? And I said, yes, I can if you give me creative control. Later, Irwin called me and told me, why don't we make the movie set on Halloween night, and perhaps why don't we call it Halloween? There's never been a Halloween movie before. Horror movies are usually extremely dark. The movie begins in daylight and ends in darkness. We're going to slide you into it very carefully. There was a haunted house in my small town of Bowling Green. It was out beyond the bypass, out on a lonely road, and the legends over the years about what happened in the house began to grow and grow with each telling. I think each town has some house of tragedy, someplace that no one goes near. It's almost like a Old Testament reaction to what happens when something tragic takes place. One of the questions that I have been asked ever since 1978, over and over again, by every person, almost every interview that I've ever had, is what scares you. There seems to be a fascination with in a personal way, what scares John Carpenter. And my answer, I began by saying nothing, and then by saying loss of control or making up something. But I think what scares me scares every human on the planet. We're all aware of the forces of darkness, of evil, of loss, death. We know it as little children. I mean, I think all of this is dealt with in Grimm's fairy tales. I think it's dealt with in horror movies. Horror is a universal language. Fate is like a natural element, as is evil. It's undeniable and will not die. I think that's where a director can pull the strings of an audience, by tapping into the primal fear of man, the unknown, death, mutilation, all the things we all know in our hearts that can happen. We're just afraid they may happen to us. Again, if you look at the time, there were low-budget horror movies, but none that had broken a threshold in a long time. And Halloween did, because it scared its audiences. Horror has a job to do. A lot of times people ghettoize horror. They don't respect it. They think it's like pornography. You shouldn't be doing this stuff. But really, there is a function to it. If you can scream and be frightened in a theater in safety, you come out into the real world and sleep peacefully, and you've had a catharsis. You've had an experience that's made you a little bit better. You can survive the night. You can survive the terrors of the world. Often in horror movies, characters will see the little green man landing or something, and they'll run up to their spouses and say, I just saw a little green man. And the spouses say, oh honey, no you didn't. I've always wondered in movies why characters don't say, oh really? Let's go find him. I recall being heavily criticized by Pauline Kael at this point that I had no sense of timing. I may not have had her sense of timing, but this was all deliberately planned to be as slow and agonizing as possible. You know this guy is going to spring upon someone. The question is when. So you want to yell at the character, stop combing your hair, stop walking around and singing, start dealing with the fact there's a killer out there. Another debate that's going on today is television violence turn us into homicidal killers? Or does real life turn us into homicidal killers? You can pretty much imagine where I come down on the idea. This evil that stalks the streets can't be reasoned away. Psychopathic, sociopathic personalities have no guilt. They're predators of humans in real life. There's something missing in their humanity. They wear the mask of sanity. We believe them to be real and true human beings. But underneath, the most chilling thing is that they don't care about other human life. There's a grain of truth in every successful horror film. Something in it resonates with the audience. One of the reasons, perhaps, that Halloween was so popular was it came right around the time of the Jonestown Massacre, which was itself a rather horrific and terrible tragedy. And the idea of a sociopath, psychopathic personality on the loose seemed to hit the audience. Halloween brought up a lot of imitators. Friday the 13th was a fairly obvious example of something that imitated it precisely. But they began to become more and more grotesque and violent, and they lost sight of character, they lost sight of tempo and timing, and became something called splatter movies. I suppose it's blood splattering on the wall. I don't know what to say about them, except that I'm very flattered by the fact that I was imitated so much. When I was in college, I had a class, psychology or something, and we visited a mental institution, and this was in Kentucky. And I visited the most serious mentally ill patients. And there was this kid, I must have been 12 or 13, and he literally had this look that I gave the lines to Donald Pleasance to say.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
It's a schizophrenic stare, is what it is. It's a real evil stare, and it was unsettling to me. And it was like the creepiest thing I'd ever seen, just because as a stranger, it was completely insane. Fate is like a natural element, as is evil. It's undeniable and will not die. I think that's where a director can pull the strings of an audience, by tapping into the primal fear of man, the unknown, death, mutilation, all the things we all know in our hearts that can happen. We're just afraid they may happen to us. It was originally written the way you see it. In other words, it's a pale mask with human features, almost featureless. I don't know why I wrote that down, why Deborah and I decided on that. Maybe it was because of an old movie called Eyes Without a Face. It's a French film, Franjou made it, and this girl had a burned face, so she wore this face mask. It was real creepy because it was featureless and immobile except for her eyes. So Tommy Lee Wallace, the production designer, ran up to the mask shop on Hollywood Boulevard and bought a couple. One was a clown mask, and that's, one way to go. And the other, he got this William Shatner Star Trek mask, Captain Kirk. I guess I owe the success of Halloween to William Shatner. The hilarious thing about the mask situation is that the mask of Captain Kirk, anyway, looked nothing like him. Nothing like him. I mean, it just looked like, I don't know what it looked like, but that was the secret, that we really didn't look like William Shatner at all. My first choice was Peter Cushing. Peter Cushing was a famous British actor. I just loved him since I was a kid. This was in 1978. In 77, Peter Cushing was in Star Wars. So we called his agent and made an offer, and he would never deem to be in your little low-budget film. Donald accepted the part. My most frightening moment as a director was the first time I had to go meet Donald. Years later, I became very close with Donald. He became a very dear, dear, dear friend. But at the time, I was scared to death of him. So he said, I don't know why I'm doing this film. I don't know what my character is all about. The only reason I'm here is because my daughter, who's a rock and roll guitar player, thought that the music you did in Assault on Precinct 13 was good, so I don't know what I'm doing. I had 3 days to do the score, and my father bought me a pair of bongos, believe it or not, when I was a teenager, which I never particularly learned how to play, but he taught me 5/4 time on them. At 5/4 time, it became the Halloween. That's all that is. Da 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 da. It worked. The movie's about the revenge of the repressed, and Jamie Lee has a connection with the killer because she's repressed too. To me, these kids are just engaged in normal teenage behavior. They get killed because they're not paying attention. They're involved with their boyfriends and they don't think anything's going on. There's no Christian right morality. No. Laurie's going to be set up as a lonely kid, sweet, virginal, alone. The movie was heavily criticized for some aspects of this idea that the other girls in the movie since they had boyfriends, were somehow morally deserving of dying from the hands of the shape. And Jamie Lee, because she was a virgin, was the heroine that I let live, which is absolutely untrue. I really enjoy the work I've been doing. I enjoy everything that's come from Halloween. If there's any point to be made in the film, is that you can survive the night. But I think everyone in the audience would say that being aware of the possibility of evil is an important thing in life. All children need to be told that the world can be bad and dark and dangerous, but with a little luck and awareness you can survive.